Cuba, an architecturally beautiful socialist state, deprived of necessary funding for upkeep by decades of U.S. sanctions. But now that relations with the U.S. are improving, will this crumbling country finally experience its long-awaited revival? Good day to you. My name is Chad Euler. On tonight's broadcast, Courtney Allen and I will investigate the global business strategy of multinational corporations entering state-run economies with volatile international policymaking. In this special edition of Illinois Business Report, we explore the cases of Nestle and Coca-Cola, two hallmark firms that met with differing outcomes when expanding to Cuba during periods of openness to foreign investment. Through these scenarios, we explore how businesses identify and capitalize on opportunities to catalyze international growth and how they account for uncertain political reforms through their corporate foreign policies. We start by examining the history and current situation of Nestle Corolac, a joint venture established with the Cuban government to manufacture and sell ice cream. We join Courtney in the El Cotoro district of Havana for an exclusive interview with Danny Ugzi, Senior Business Strategist for Nestle Americas. Courtney?
Danny joins us from the Nestle Corolac factory, built in 2003 to produce ice cream. Today, this $7.9 million factory produces about 800,000 liters of ice cream per month, which is sold to tourists and native Cubans in hotels, restaurants, and stores. Danny, take us back to 1996, when Nestle signed a letter of intent with the Cuban government to establish this joint venture. This was during a brief period of liberalized regulations on foreign investment, which had previously been blocked. What opportunities did Nestle see in Cuba, despite the uncertain international policy?
Hi, Courtney. Thanks for the question. First, let me mention that Nestlé had history in Cuba prior to the 60s. In fact, Cuba was one of Nestlé's top 5 markets in Latin America. In 1996, as a response to the Cuban economic crisis, Law 77 was passed, which reopened the doors to foreign investment. Nestlé saw Law 77 as an opportunity to pave the way for potential future open market in Cuba, accomplishing 3 things. First, creating a partnership with the Cuban government through a joint venture called Nestle Corolac. Second, to build Nestlé's brand awareness as a high-quality product and therefore condition the Cuban consumer to prefer the Nestlé brand. In the meantime, we could apply on financial viability for the strong tourist industry in Cuba. And third, we could establish a manufacturing facility in a strategically advantageous location in America, in anticipation for future trade opportunities with the U.S.
So I understand there were several compelling reasons why Nestle was uniquely positioned to enter Cuba and to take advantage of the opportunities there. But there also must have been challenges to overcome. Can you tell us about these obstacles?
Sure. And you are right, Courtney. Nestlé Corolac had to live with the frustrations of a socialist system. There were several obstacles, such as labor policy. Cuban workers are all paid as government employees, so companies are unable to set wages. Low cost of labor is typically an advantage in emerging markets, but in this case, Nestlé could not rely on this source of cost savings. Another significant obstacle was the lack of influence over the supply chain. When expanding to other world markets, part of our mission is to foster the development of our suppliers through technical assistance and training, creating, therefore, shared value. However, in Cuba, it was prohibited that this relationship could occur, so Nestlé was unable to implement policies that typically increase the quality of suppliers' inputs. Finally, we have had to deal with political instability, for which the joint venture was a path forward, as the government had incentives to make this joint succeed.
And succeed you did. Since building the factory in 2003, Nestle has achieved a brand recognition of 60%, second only to the iconic local brand Capelia. And Nestle is the preferred ice cream brand of 27% of Cubans surveyed. Which business strategies formed the basis for this success?
Good question. We started with marketing strategy focused on providing high-quality ice cream to tourists and Cubans with access to the Cuban convertible currency, CUCs. Even though our product carries a premium price point, we distinguish ourselves from our main competitor, Capelia, through quality, consistency, availability, and promotion of our product. We also simplified and standardized our product. So although we are able to produce a wide variety of flavors, we decided to offer only 3. We also decided to sell only in uniform half-liter containers to ensure consistency in stocking. In contrast, our main competitor, Coppelia, sells an abundance of flavors, but cannot reliably ensure the availability of individual flavors or even have enough product on hand to satisfy consumer demand. We also made our product more widely available than our competition, selling through hotels, restaurants, and stores. Our main competitor has only one storefront, and customers must wait in long lines outside to purchase the product. In-store promotion was another key to build brand recognition. As part of this, we distributed 1,000 Nestle brand ice cream coolers to retail locations. This way, we enforced our high-quality brand image. We ensured these coolers were clean, organized, and well-stocked, which helped reinforce a high-quality image.
This has been an effective strategy, but political volatility is still a concern. Nestle is no stranger to shifts in foreign policy regarding international investment in Cuba. With the recent U.S. deregulation on business investment in Cuba, Nestle may soon have to grapple with the entrance of major competitors. What is Nestle planning in anticipation of this potential change?
This change will bring potential new opportunities and challenges. Our plan is to capitalize on the groundwork that Nestle already has in place. We gained significant competitive advantages by moving in 1996. We now have a strong brand in Cuba, an operational factory, and a network of suppliers and distributors. It will be challenging for competitors to capture market share while dealing with administrative challenges and building facilities and forming relationships. More specifically, future trade with the US could both improve access to necessary inputs and allow Nestle to bring Cuban goods to market in the US. In fact, as of 2016, Nestle was permitted to bring coffee beans produced in Cuba by independent farmers to the US market. In the future, we anticipate to bring candy, ice cream, drinks, and other consumer products made in Cuba to the US. Again, we plan to take advantage of the infrastructure we have created in Cuba, which will allow us to retain our competitive advantage as well as to move goods produced in Cuba to other markets as investment and trade opportunities expand.
Thank you for those insights, Danny. Back to you, Chad.
Very interesting. Now let's examine the case of Coca-Cola. Like Nestle, Coke exited Cuba in the 1960s due to nationalist business policy, but did not re-enter upon the passing of Law 77. However, they are preparing to re-enter the Cuban market in the near future. Courtney is joined by Ariel Fang, Executive Vice President of Coca-Cola Caribbean.
Thank you, Chad. I'm here with Ariel to speak to us about Coca-Cola's recent initiative to re-enter the Cuban market. Thank you for being with me today. We know that Coca-Cola left Cuba in the 1960s due to a tightening political environment in Fidel Castro's stronghold. Explain that strategic decision.
Glad to be here. Coke has a long-standing history with Cuba. Cuba was one of the first 3 countries that Coke entered during its first global expansion initiative. It was one of our first foreign direct investments back in 1906. Cuba's geographic distance from the U.S., access to export ports, and abundance of raw sugar made it a very appealing location for Coke's expansion in the past. Now that the political climate has changed, Coke is very excited to re-enter, not only because of geographic advantages, but also because we see Cuban expansion as a strategic move for Coke's long-term success. We decided not to enter Cuba in the 1990s due to our brand association with American patriotism. At the time, there was too much risk for individuals to be seen drinking a Coke in Cuba.
Although the current political environment in Cuba, as well as the relations between the U.S. and Cuba, have improved, there is still a great deal of uncertainty about foreign investment in Cuba and about Cuban economic policy. What is Coke doing differently to address this uncertainty? Why is this level of risk appropriate as compared to the level of risk in the 1990s?
Since the exit in 1906, Coke has had half a century worth of experience in foreign direct investments in countries with hostilities towards Western political ideologies and Americanism. Going through an in-depth cage analysis of Coke's global standing, we were able to successfully enter countries such as Myanmar, Somalia, and Burma. Like Cuba, these countries represented emerging markets with stringent political, economic, and administrative policies. So we've proven we can succeed under these conditions. Coke has also been active in shifting our brand away from being strictly American to a global brand. Coke is for everyone. At the end of the day, happiness in a bottle can be enjoyed by anyone, no matter who or where they are. Finally, we are partnering with FEMSA, a multinational bottling company based out of Cuba, in our re-entry process and working in full compliance with the government here. We're working closely with local partners to make sure that Coke's transition back into Cuba's daily life is as seamless as possible. We really hope to play an active role in ensuring the welfare of Cuba's economy and people as it goes through key policy changes.
We hope to see a Coca-Cola plant next time we're in Cuba. Thank you for coming in today. We now return to Chad for an analysis of future business opportunities in Cuba. Chad?
What a captivating interview. It's interesting to note that Nestle and Coke are both using joint ventures to enter Cuba. However, Nestle partnered with the government. This strategy was suited to the early timing of the entry, when bipolar foreign policy shifts made political buy-in the most important factor. Coke, entering Cuba later, is forming a joint venture with a local company. This will facilitate Coke's establishment in Cuba by outsourcing their bottling operations. Although Coke will cooperate with the government, greater political stability means Coke can leverage connections with local companies. From these cases, we can see that evaluating alignment between the situation in Cuba and the company capabilities is necessary for firms wanting to expand to Cuba. While the potential of foreign direct investment in Cuba is exciting to many firms, managers must assess these four things. The first one being identify a market opportunity for their company's product or service. Cuba has an underserved market for most goods and services, but may not have enough high consumer demand for it. In addition, the dual currency system may prohibit certain segments from purchasing goods. Later in the program, we will be joined by Chief Economist from the IMF, Nikhil Tete, to elaborate on this situation. The second one is managers should also perform a cage analysis, paying particular attention to administrative and economic factors. They must research and perform due diligence on geographic risk, evaluating transnational risks and regional political trends, and also local in-country risk. The third factor is firms should evaluate the best timing for entry based on political stability and the competitive landscape. The fourth, finally, multinational corporations must leverage company experience, taking advantage of their unique capabilities. For example, Nestle leveraged its strengths in emerging markets for successful entrance to Cuba. Keeping these lessons in mind, we will turn to Nikhil Tete, Chief Economist for the IMF, to discuss the implications of Cuba's dual currency system on future global business opportunities. Nikhil, tell us about the currency unification.
So the Cuban government has decided to move forward with what is known as a currency unification strategy. In the past, Cuba has maintained two forms of currencies, the Cuban peso, which is known as CUP, and a convertible Cuban peso, which is known as the CUC. The CUC is pegged at 1-to-1 ratio with the US dollar and used to set prices for commodities. The value of CUP is considerably less than the USD and is the currency in which the workers are paid. However, both currencies are accepted in Cuba. This creates problems for the consumers and businesses. Businesses must deal in CUC but may be providing goods to customers that primarily have CUPs and cannot afford these goods. Therefore, the Cuban government has decided to unify these currencies.
What are the implications of this strategy for businesses operating in Cuba?
The Cuban government will first have to devalue its currency from 1:1 ratio of CUC to USD to a 1:24 ratio of CUP to USD. That way, one currency can be circulated domestically and internationally. Devaluation will result in large-scale inflation, which is not good for businesses. But inflation is expected to stabilize within 2 years as per our calculations. Companies wanting to earn large-scale profits by expanding and operating in Cuba must therefore be willing to take losses in the short term.
So what does this mean for businesses wanting to enter into Cuba in the next year or two?
Good question, Chad. The current business policy of Castro government has opened doors to foreign investments. The first movers will have a significant edge over the others in terms of capturing the market share. But the problem, as we discussed briefly before, is expected short-term losses due to inflation. If the companies can finance their expansion despite those initial losses, then they have a potential to earn large profit in the longer term.
Thank you, Nikhil, for that in-depth analysis. How exciting. We will have to keep a very close eye on Cuba in the near future. There you have it, folks. Be sure to tune in next time, but until then, stay classy, Chambana.